Hello and welcome to another episode of News Bants with myself, Sabite.
And me, Paul Nezendonyi.
Hi, Paul. How are you?
Hi, I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm looking. We're going to discuss something very serious tonight, but I'm also looking forward to watching Married at First Sight Australia.
Oh my God. I thought you were going to say something serious there.
No, I'm addicted. I'm addicted. It's quite sad.
Really?
Yeah, it's. I'm deferring EastEnders to watch Married at First
No,
Sight Australia. Yeah, that's how it is, Paul.
that is serious.
I know. I know.
Well, I'm going to be making pancakes, so that'll be the highlight of my evening.
Oh, lovely, lovely, lovely. Well, we have a serious topic to discuss tonight, Paul. And I know it's one that lots of people have been talking about, actually, media and clinicians, communities, etc. And it's the topic around COVID-19. But actually, we wanted to look specifically at why the uptake for the vaccine among Black and minority ethnic groups is lower than the white population, and we'll come on to talk about that in a while. But I suppose initially, what are your general thoughts about how the COVID vaccine rollout is going?
I think it's been going very well, hasn't it? I mean, it's undeniable that the government, for once in this crisis, this pandemic, set itself a target and it's meeting that target. I think this is the first time in a long time that I feel like we can say they know what they're doing, they have a plan of sorts, and they're delivering against it. I think the fact that the older populations are being vaccinated, it's brilliant, and it does give us a sense of hope, which I think we've needed for a long time.
You know what, Paul? I absolutely agree with you. I have to admit, when the vaccine rollout started and they made all these promises, I thought, oh my God, it's just going to be like the other stuff that they promised. It's not going to go smoothly, and oh my God, what will happen if it doesn't? And like you, I've been really pleasantly surprised and relieved, actually, that this vaccine rollout is going brilliantly. And I think regardless, because I know we often talk about politics and what have you, but this is something the whole country can get behind and be proud of, because we need it. We need this light at the end of this very dark tunnel. And so it is reassuring that the rollout is going very well, and the government is on track to meet its target of the top 4 groups being vaccinated with their injections. I can't remember the date, but essentially they're on track to do this, which is brilliant, which is good news. But against that whole backdrop, and obviously, we can talk about what's going on in other parts of the world, but we have an issue in this country in that the vaccine take-up is lower in Black and ethnic minority communities, and that's actually quite disturbing, because we know already, and people might not like the term BAME because it puts everyone in one bucket, but for the purposes of this show and what we're trying to communicate, I will use the term. But I think, we know that COVID disproportionately affects people from backgrounds like ours. And so you want people to therefore do everything that's within their power to keep themselves protected from it. But unfortunately, I think the latest figures from GPs is that white people are twice as likely to be vaccinated as people from Black backgrounds. Yeah. And I think it's twice or 3 times for people from mixed backgrounds as well. So there's a real problem there in that people are hesitant about taking the vaccine, and we know there are lots of reasons why. And we've actually spoken to some people to ask them what their thoughts are. So shall we listen to those views and see what they say?
Yeah, let's hear from them.
Great.
I think there's just general distrust of statutory institutions, whether it's the police, the NHS. You have to remember that these people, the cohort that we're talking about now, those who are, who are probably the Windrush generation who came over and was subjected to racism, a lot of racism, conscious and unconscious bias. So of course they're going to feel quite suspicious of these these statutory organisations and institutions. I guess the best way of tackling this is just having, candid conversations with the communities, using organisations and structures that are available for our communities, like such as churches or mosques or institutions that are generally trusted.
I think a lot of education needs to be given to religious leaders. In terms of Christianity, I know there's been a lot on social media about the vaccine, Bill Gates, etc., being linked to the end times and 666, etc. But when people actually sit down and read what the Bible says, they'll see that there's no correlation, really, and that's not what the Bible talks about in terms of the end times. So I think a lot of the religious leaders need to be educated, because they will in turn then educate their congregation. I've heard about a lot of people who have changed their mind about the vaccine once they've gone to a teaching at their church, which actually makes it clear what the vaccine is about. Because these are just people who just don't maybe not understand really what the science is about, especially when you hear the word mRNA and it's been linked to DNA. They think that the government's trying to change our DNA. So really, I think religious leaders, pastors, churches, and I've seen it happening where they are doing a lot more Zoom meetings and with doctors, etc., just to teach their congregation about what's going on. So,
hi, thanks for the opportunity to feed into this. I think in terms of the reason why there's hesitancy, it stems from a lack of trust in services, which has been around from long before COVID. People don't feel that they can trust what doctors are telling them, and also people prefer to use natural remedies rather than medical remedies. So that's one thing. What we can do about it, there's something for me around peer advocacy and peer support. So getting individuals who've had the vaccine to talk to their peers and speak for them as well, where there's a need for that, and really being clear this is about prevention and about support and about ending the virus rather than doing any damage to individuals. That's my feeling.
Wow, some really interesting perspectives there, Paul, about why there is vaccine hesitancy. I mean, based on that and your own views, what do you think some of the issues are?
I think one of the big things is the lack of trust in institutions. Someone mentioned the police, and it's interesting to think, it's all these, the institutions that our society is built on aren't trusted by BME communities and by other groups of people, perhaps. And I think that is a real issue. And it's at times like this, when we face a crisis, that you realise how damaging that lack of trust is. And it goes back years. It's not just, it's not just now that we don't trust these institutions. This is going back years and years of, people facing racism, facing abuse, and I just don't know how you can deal with that over the coming weeks and months. It's something that needs to be rebuilt over time. And then there's also the issue of just understanding the science, and so people not understanding whether or not the vaccine's halal, people not understanding whether or not it's going to change your body or in some way or affect your DNA. And I think there's so there is a need for education, and so it is those two things. It's the trust and it's the education and understanding.
Yeah, I mean, these things aren't new, are they? Because, as you say, BME communities have, and trust in institutions and actually how they've been treated by institutions over the years has eroded their faith and trust in them. And, I've spoken to people and they've quoted things back from the Tuskegee study that was done. I can't remember the year, but we're talking about a very, very long time ago. They quote things back in history that have happened to Black people, where they feel that Black people have been exploited for Western gain, whether that's testing them for various things or giving them various things. They feel that this kind of situation that we're in now mirrors what happened years and years ago. And it's amazing to think that people still carry those doubts. I was in an email exchange with what actually was a Twitter exchange, which you saw, whereby a candidate actually that's standing for London Mayor, and I won't mention the person's name, but they, they said they're well informed, they're speaking to health professionals, and they tweeted this image. And it was, I can't remember who it was the president of Tanzania or someone, and basically they made claims that the COVID vaccine is, that forever the white people have been exploiting Africans for generations, and so we shouldn't fall for this. This is basically another way to exploit black people. And I challenged him because obviously it's not true. And I said to him, you do realise that the vaccine has been given to everybody, regardless of your ethnicity. Everybody is getting the vaccine. So on that level, what you're saying actually doesn't make sense. And instead of, a normal conversation ensuing, this person then proceeded to kind of abuse me. And in the end, I had to block them. But I thought to myself, wow, this person is not willing to look at any logic. Their mind is closed to logic completely. And for me, I find that really scary. I mean, don't get me wrong, I fully understand and appreciate that, trust in institutions actually, and it's not just to black and minority ethnic communities, but generally across the world, trust in our institutions has declined generally. And I fully get it and appreciate that. But what I don't understand is how the move from that to preventing you from getting a vaccine, which could actually save your life, it's that bit that I find very difficult to understand. I understand the historical context. And you're right, I don't think it's something that can be fixed in weeks or, just via a campaign. And it's more deep rooted than that, which is why I think, and it was mentioned by one of the people who left us a message, people listen to people like their pastors, for example. They're more likely to listen to those types of leaders. If you go to church and you're one of those people who listen to pastors, you're more likely to listen to the advice of your pastor than the advice from Boris Johnson, quite frankly. And I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done to bring more of those people on board, because they are really, really important in getting people to take the vaccine. It's grassroots activity, but you're right, this can't be done quickly. It can't be done quickly. And we see this, for example, the census campaign, which is happening now for the census. I remember working on a census campaign 10 years ago, and the issues around trust and whether or not people wanted to fill in the census were there. And it's these same sorts of issues. People didn't have trust in big institutions, don't want to fill in the census. What are they going to do with my information? It's the same sort of thing. But there doesn't seem to be any long-term strategy to tackle these things.
I think going back, the person, that you mentioned who you've had to block, I'm pleased you've done that because, I think they are bonkers. But I think actually, if we think about it, they are basing this on some logic. They've looked back and said, well, in the past, when there have been illnesses, black people or people of colour or people of different races have been mistreated. And so there is a logic there. And that's one of the things that I think is the most challenging, is that when I've spoken to people who said, I'm not having the vaccine because I'm black and I don't trust it, actually, they're basing it on experience and on history. And that's their logic, that's their science. And actually, it is a valid argument in some ways, because how do they know any more than we do? We trust. We're in the privileged position, if you like, because we trust the institutions and what they're telling us. But there are a lot of people, particularly older generations, who just don't trust. And as we said, as we've agreed, that's going to take a long time to get over. I think the other thing we know is that in terms of clinical trials, BME people don't come forward to take part in those trials. So again, I think there is a valid argument for, well, actually, has it been tested on enough people? Is the question people will be asking. Has it been tested on people like me? And it's very hard for us to say that. And so again, it's hard to build that trust. And I think that's where it takes time, because again, we need to make sure that in future, when we're developing medicines and vaccines, we're building up trust as we go along, because this isn't just about this vaccine. We see it with all vaccines that people from different backgrounds are disproportionately less likely to take up the vaccine if you're black or from a BME background. What a study I saw today, which was very interesting, from University Health Hospitals of Leicester, has really concerned me, because they're showing that about 70% of white staff have taken up the vaccine, but amongst South Asian staff, it falls to 58%, and amongst black staff, it falls to 36%. And these are people who have the science, who are educated in medicine and know the value of the vaccine potentially, but they're deciding not to take it. And so actually, it really does show that issues of race and history are really deeply ingrained in our culture and our society. And, I remember, a few weeks ago, we were arguing as a country about whether we should discuss the slave trade and statues and that kind of thing. And it just, and it goes back to that. That's the reason why those things are important, because they still affect society today. People still feel that, the impact of what was done to black people over time. And the fact is, it's still an issue we need to tackle today. And if we're going to live with COVID, which we are, we need to deal with this, because potentially we're going to need vaccines every 6 months, every year, who knows? But we need to find a way.
Yeah, and Paul, I mean, you're right. You're absolutely right. I don't think this is not a one answer solution, because there's so many different factors at play here. I saw, and I think I sent to you a message that I was sent via a source, and it was a crazy WhatsApp message. It was about was it Tanzania?
Tanzania, yeah.
It was Tanzania, and essentially it was a video of people in a sauna type environment, a makeshift sauna, going in there, and it's supposed to be infused with herbs and spices and all the rest of it, and that is the treatment for COVID. And actually, if you look at news around Tanzania, they're not going in for the vaccine, they're looking at natural remedies. And this is going round, and the copy that was underneath it was something like, it was all about, the Western world don't want us to use our natural remedies, and there was like the applause emoji.
Yeah.
And I just thought, wow, again, how do you break that down? Because that is deep. I mean, this is the whole country, for goodness sake, that's going down this natural remedy route. No one's saying that natural remedies don't work for things, but this is COVID. This is something completely different. And how do you break that down when people just are not looking at science at all and think that they can come up with their own remedies? Because that's the other thing. I mean, WhatsApp and all the messages you get on WhatsApp, and I'm sure you see this, aunties, uncles, all the rest of it, it's full of so much fake news, so much rubbish about using hot water and lemon to cure COVID and all sorts of stuff. And those messages sweep through communities, they're just forwarded on. And I wonder if there's some sort of responsibility here. I know these are encrypted messages, but we've had conversations about kind of social media platforms. They have a responsibility here as well, I think, because if these messages are being shared on social networks and people are actually ingesting this and thinking, yes, this is true, this is fact, that's a bad thing. So, I want to see the social media companies stepping up and trying to do something about fake news being spread on their networks.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think actually, in terms of social media, it just shouldn't be a platform. And I think the same with mainstream TV. I think that sometimes even on the BBC, you'll see them bring on someone from the other side, or a different scientist to put forward a view. And actually, at a time like this, when you're facing a health crisis, we just need the facts. We don't need to hear the other side. We don't need opinion. And I think that actually stretches to religious groups. I think in some of these community groups where they're telling people not to take the vaccine, or they're spreading misinformation, those groups need to be, frankly, they need to be shut down, or something needs to happen. It just shouldn't be allowed. This is a crisis situation. And I completely agree with you on those videos that are going around from, what's happening in Africa. But yeah, that is worrying, because actually those countries are saying we don't trust the white man, or we don't trust the West, or whatever. And it just scares me that those countries aren't going to get through this. And what's worrying is that I still don't feel like we've got a global approach to tackling COVID.
No.
You know, even within the UK, we've got a different approach to Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland. And, you know, when you look to Europe and the world and America, we're all doing different things. And actually, we will see even more, you know, disparity between us and countries like, you know, African countries, and countries that decide to go their own way or develop their own vaccines and follow their own processes. It really is quite worrying about where this could end up.
So how, I mean, Paul, I guess, you know, we know the issues. It's now, how do we tackle it? I mean, I worry, and I know the government has set aside some money, community funds, and that includes outreach to places like churches, mosques, and community groups, etc. But as we said, this isn't something that's going to change overnight. And I do worry that if people are not taking the vaccine, it's going to affect them, and it's going to affect the wider population as well. And I just don't know. I don't know what all the answers are. We can come up with kind of some things and say, yes, pastors and, you know, imams in mosques, etc. If they're on board, they can, you know, encourage their congregations to do this. But it seems to be, as we say, much deeper than that. And is it a case that, I don't know, it's hard, because I remember, for example, when there was that big influencer campaign, you know, initially telling people about the vaccines, and in the papers we saw certain people getting the vaccine, and it was all over the papers. And I thought they should have some Black and Asian people as part of this as well. And I know there since has been a campaign by some celebrities, but it was a bit late in the day. But I don't know, this requires real getting to the grassroots of the heart of communities, and I just don't think government can do this. I don't think they can.
No, government can't, and government isn't trusted. And I think the videos, you know, the celebrity videos in particular, will go so far. You know, we had the political parties, you know, put down their swords and unite to create a video. And as you said, we've seen celebrity videos, but they only go so far, because actually I think the people we're talking about probably aren't going to be going onto Twitter or YouTube to watch videos. They're the people who are getting things, as you say, on WhatsApp, you know, that have been passed on in the past, you know, that have gone through, you know, thousands of people. And it's those, you know, the ones that have that ring of, you know, conspiracy theory, they're the ones that are the most powerful. Actually, a shiny celebrity video is probably going to make some people think, oh, it's propaganda, I'm not listening to this. It's more propaganda from the government. So I think that's where, you know, we need proper, authentic engagement, and it does need to come from people within the communities, and it needs to be targeted. You know, the messages need to be targeted. So, you know, Muslims will need a particular message, Christians will need a particular message. People from, you know, who are Black and African will want to hear certain things, and I think it needs to be really, really targeted and specific. People who are older want to hear something maybe different to people who are younger.
Yeah,
and,
agree.
You know, you want to hear, you know, some people listen to their pastor, some people listen to their elderly neighbour on their street. Some people will listen to what the Mirror says. I don't know. It's different people will engage with different sources, and then people need to hear it multiple times, and that might help. But the main thing is that we then need to build on this, you know, over time. You know, and you think we've got the Grenfell inquiry going on, and it's things like that that will just, you know, completely reinforce that distrust in society. So actually, we need to make sure we're making progress across all areas of life, and that's the only way I think we'll get through this, and it will take time.
Yeah, I think this speaks to the heart of the negative effect, or one of the negative outcomes of inequality in life chances, inequality in opportunity, inequality in general. People feel marginalized. People don't feel as though they're part of the system, and that the system is against them. It all stems from inequality. We've seen that inequality in healthcare, and it just, this is massive. This is massive. But what, this conversation has actually been really interesting, because even though I think the people who don't take the vaccine are bonkers, and because of all the conspiracy theories, at the same time, I think if we're going to change people's minds, we almost have to understand the bonkersness, if you see what I mean. Because if you don't, I don't want to say respect the bonkersness, because you can't respect bonkersness, but do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, it's fine for you in your, upper middle class tree to look down and call people bonkers, but I think some people are just going, this is their experience, it's what they think.
It is. You're right.
I don't know. I don't think it's their fault necessarily. I think because I think some people will read the stuff and decide, I still don't want it. I still don't trust, because I still fundamentally don't trust it. It's been made too quickly. It's not being tested on the right people. There will be people that are still basing this on their logic, on their own version of logic.
And I guess that's what I'm saying, is that, okay, maybe how I expressed it wasn't correct. But what I am saying is that we do have to understand where they are coming from, because without that, if you just dismiss it, and I know I said bonkersness because it is, but if you don't if you don't acknowledge where they're coming from, you'll never be able to kind of try and change that perspective at all. So it's you almost have to basically immerse yourself in the ideology that's behind all this stuff, and try and help. I wonder if something like nudge theory, but nudge theory specifically aimed. Well, do you know what? Desperate times calls for desperate measures, and nudge theory does work in some regard. It does, but I'm thinking that perhaps this needs to be a bit more specialist in terms of how it's done. I don't know how, but I'm thinking some sort of nudge theory. I don't know what that looks like. I haven't had time to have a creative session to work this out, but I think that could come into it. And I think obviously BAME communities, and this isn't exclusive to BAME communities, but we care about our families. Older people care about their kids, their grandkids, the next generation. Family is a big thing, and I wonder if there's something that we can do around family and the importance of protecting family members and future generations. I think it needs a lot more thought. I think, as you say, it can't just be a general campaign, because this is nuanced stuff. It really is nuanced stuff. It's interesting. I know someone, a friend of a friend. She's in her late 50s. Her mum is in her 80s, and they're Nigerian. So her mum is, she's had her first vaccine and she's really pleased. Her daughter, who's in her 50s, was really annoyed that her mum went for the vaccine. She refuses to wear a mask anywhere. She's literally just, I don't even know how it's developed, but she's against everything to do with the vaccine. And it's really funny that her mum is in her 80s but is pro this and is happy that she's had it. And I think she was asked, when it comes to your term, will you have the vaccine? And she says no. And it's hard. It's just so hard to understand the logic. It is really difficult, but we've got to keep going. And also it's got to be, it's a bit like, we talk about the EU. I know this is not relevant, but we only kind of found out about the benefits of the EU once it was too late, as in it's time to leave. And we always said there should have been an ongoing campaign about why the EU is important, blah, blah, blah. And it's like that with this stuff that's happening with the vaccine. This is one example of how, distrust and that connection, it hasn't been there for years with BAME community and an authority. This is like a sweeping statement now, but it's not there. But why it's now that it's a vital time where we all need to have this vaccine, where it's exposed, and now what's going to happen? So it's this is really an ongoing thing. It's an ongoing thing.
And this is also why it's important that we continue to invest in the NHS and in health campaigns, because actually, yeah, it needs to be ongoing, and we need, different community groups to understand the importance of vaccines and good health generally.
Yeah, definitely, especially as it's something that disproportionately affects Spain communities more. We should be trying to help ourselves essentially. It's interesting. There was something tweeted from the director of Runnymede Trust earlier, and I mean, I don't know if it's happened since, and things might change by the time this goes out and broadcast, but they were looking at basically BAME communities being prioritised now for the vaccine. That is interesting. I know that when there was talk of that initially, I think that got people's backs up and they were scared, saying, "Oh, why do they want us to go first? Why are we going to be the guinea pigs?" And that I heard a lot of that initially when that was being spoken about a few months ago. It'll be interesting to see what happens now, because everybody is taking this vaccine. It's not, everybody's taking the vaccine. It's just, for me, it's sad actually. It's a sad state of affairs whereby so much has happened. There's been so much, trust has eroded so much that people are prepared to suffer essentially because of it. It's sad, and it doesn't speak volumes or good things about our society, quite frankly.
No, you're right. It's very scary.
Well, Paul, any final thoughts on this at all?
I just encourage anyone listening to talk to friends, family, colleagues, and encourage them to take the vaccine and to spread the word, really.
Yeah, definitely. Me too. I would say that's the thing. I mean, WhatsApp and all the stuff, all the rubbish not rubbish, all the things that appear on WhatsApp, we need critical thinking. We need people to think critically, read stuff, read the official paperwork about the vaccine, read it and make up your own mind. Speak to actually the professionals. There's so many Black and minority ethnic people working in the healthcare system. There's so many doctors, nurses. Speak to people who know about this stuff rather than people who don't, and basically peddle fake news, because it doesn't do anyone any good ultimately.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, Paul, that was the end of our News Bants special on the COVID vaccine, and we'll be back very soon, everybody, with a new podcast. So thank you so much for listening and watching. As per usual, you can catch us at Twitter at News Bants.
We're also on Instagram at News Bants.
And if you're watching this, you'll already know that we're on YouTube as well. Please do subscribe. Please do recommend us and leave a comment. We love it. Until next time, take care.
Goodbye.
Bye.